Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we're celebrating our 100th subscriber. Actually, since last we spoke, we're up to 103 subscribers. So welcome everyone, I hope you enjoy the channel. We're going to celebrate by doing something special. We're going to talk about what was happening on the 100th day of the Revolutionary War. Now, I understand that the Revolutionary War began with the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which was on April 19th, 1775. So if my calculations are correct, which, I'm into history, not into counting, so we'll see. I believe the 100th day is July 27th, 1775. So, on July 27, 1775, there were several things going on throughout the colonies. And I am going to focus on George Washington's general orders to the Continental Army today. But first, I did want to kind of poke around some of the other places. On the 100th day of the Revolutionary War, Virginia was having its third Virginia Convention. And not a lot happened, but they were meeting and they had just chased their governor out. Most colonies had just chased their royal governors out of the soon-to-be state. So Virginia met and was trying to figure out how to organize a government in lieu of having a governor around. And they established their first, not their first, but their first real official committee of safety, which was in essence their shadow government. They also split up their colony into segments to raise militia units to go fight in the war. And that was happening throughout most of the South. At the same time, New York, General Schuyler is planning the invasion of Canada. And he sends a little-known founder named Samuel Kirkland, who I've written about and I'm familiar with. Samuel Kirkland came out and really was the one who made friends with most of the Iroquois nation in upstate New York. And that's why I'm familiar with him, as his work more or less led to me being able to live where I live right now. So Kirkland went out and he met with some of the Iroquois. He was most closely associated with the Oneidas and the Tuscaroras, I believe it's pronounced. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And that led to a meeting with Philip Schuyler about this time, where one of the Mohawk leaders, there were a few Mohawk leaders there, also famously said, this is a family affair and we'll let your family sort it out. Now, there only ended up being so much truth to that, but that is what was happening in late July of 1775 in upstate New York. But as far as the Continental Army is concerned, I do want to remind you that, the war broke out, and then it took a little bit for word to get to Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia took a week or two to say, okay, we'll start a Continental Army. And then it took a week or two to appoint George Washington as Commander-in-Chief. Then it took a week or two for George Washington to actually get to Boston, or more appropriately, Cambridge, which is where his headquarters were stationed, while the British were occupying Boston. So, weeks have gone by, and George Washington doesn't actually get there until about mid-June of 1775. So he's really only been there about a month and a half when July 27th, 1775, the 100th day of the war, rolls around. And there's only four bullet points here in the general orders of the day. But they are very interesting. And the first one is John Trumbull, Esquire, being appointed aide-de-camp to His Excellency, the Commander-in-Chief. He is to be obeyed as such. Basically, George Washington is announcing that John Trumbull is now a member of his staff, his family, as it came to be known. John Trumbull was one of the sons of Jonathan Trumbull, who I've made a video about. I will put a link right up here. Jonathan Trumbull was the only royal governor of a colony for Connecticut, who ended up being the Revolutionary governor and then the state governor afterwards. He stuck around as governor throughout the whole thing. And he is the only founder to do such. Now, all of his sons joined the revolution in some form. John Trumbull, who we're talking about today, on day 100, was appointed to Washington's staff. He would only serve there about a year and a half, and then he'd go study art. He would end up coming back and serve on someone else's staff. I believe it was, I don't remember exactly whose staff he signed on, but he would come back. It might have been Horatio Gates. I believe it was Horatio Gates. He would come back and fight in the war, but John Trumbull, who on day 100 was appointed to George Washington's staff, would become wildly famous as the painter of the Revolution. There are several men who could be considered painters of the Revolution, of course Gilbert Stuart and several others But John Trumbull, we know what most of these founders look like because John Trumbull had them sit in a chair for a few hours and paint them. But before all that, he was a young man who served for George Washington. Next, on day 100, there is a court-martial coming. The court-martial of a man named Benjamin Whiting. Now, Whiting is kind of a nobody, but he was court-martialed, and George Washington, when he showed up to fight this war, discipline in the Continental Army was something he found very important, because back in the French and Indian War, the British soldiers made a lot of fun of the Americans for being disorderly and being like fake soldiers, and that was a big criticism. It's like they were just country bumpkins, they're just colonists, they don't know what they're doing. And Washington wanted to turn this into a serious army. Granted, that wouldn't happen for like 2 or 3 years until Baron von Steuben showed up and really whipped us into shape, but Washington was doing his best, so he held a court-martial. So Benjamin Whiting was riding through New Hampshire with another man, and this other man asked him, "Hey, what do you think of John Sullivan taking the gunpowder from the Fort William and Mary in New Hampshire?" And Whiting basically called him a damn rebel and said, "That's no good. We shouldn't have done that." And the other gentleman went to the papers and told the papers, and they made a big scene. And because of this, Benjamin Whiting, who was put on trial, and it wouldn't really be considered a court-martial. It was more like he was taken prisoner. I shouldn't have called it a court-martial. But he was being put on trial by the army because, there was martial law going on at the time. Whiting would be exonerated. However, just 2 years later, he was caught making fake continental currency and printing it and selling it. And when he was caught, he ran away and joined the Loyalists. And then in 1779, he was fighting on Long Island with the Loyalists, and he was killed in action. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong side. Unfortunately, he was killed in action. Next, Washington's order is very interesting. He very specifically says, when a British deserter comes to us and comes to the guards, he is to be sent immediately to the second row of guards, and the second row of guards will bring him immediately to the closest major general. And that major general will vet this person and then send with an escort directly to George Washington. And when you read through it, it's very interesting because it seems that instead of following those procedures, the deserters would come in and the guards would be like, "Hey, you want a drink?" And they'd get hammered. And these deserters, who were supposedly coming to help the rebels instead, would show up to George Washington wasted. And he specifically says, "Some deserters being made drunk who came last night from the enemy before they reached the headquarters. It will be considered as a breach of orders in any person who gives rum to deserters before they are examined by the general." Yes, they may have rum, but first they need to be examined by the general. And lastly, he does speak a little bit about the guards coming. He talks about smallpox and bringing people to the hospital. It's just a brief timing thing. We're going to the hospital at 6 o'clock to do rounds, basically. So, I don't want to make this video too long. That is a brief summation about what was happening during the Revolutionary War on day 100 of the Revolutionary War. Some very, very interesting things. I wanted to thank everyone who watched this video, and especially thank everyone who subscribed. It's really cool to get up to 100 people. It took about 6 months, but it'll blossom from here, I hope. If you really enjoyed this video, please hit like. If there's anything you want me to talk about, please leave a comment and tell me. I just love learning about the American Revolution. I am not an expert. I'm a student. I learn about it and I'm talking about it. And I'm glad you decided to come learn with me. If there's anything you want to learn that I can help you learn, please let me know how and what. So I'm Jason. Thank you so much, and I look forward to bringing you another video tomorrow.